The year is 1875, a foggy Sunday night in November, and in the shadowy corridors of power across London, something extraordinary is about to unfold. While the elite of Victorian society discuss coal prices and Irish unrest over their brandy and cigars, one man stands alone in a private room at 10 Downing Street, holding a telegram that will change the course of history.
What happens next will spark a financial gamble so audacious, so impossibly bold, that it will reshape empires and set in motion events still echoing through our world today. This is the story of how a desperate ruler, a cunning prime minister, and a family of bankers eating grapes would determine the fate of nations.
Benjamin Disraeli, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, isn't dining with his colleagues tonight. He's pacing back and forth, clutching a secret message from Cairo. The telegram is brief, the handwriting hurried, but its implications are staggering. The Khedive of Egypt is bankrupt. The ruler controlling the most strategic waterway on the planet is drowning in debt and ready to sell his crown jewel. That jewel is nothing less than the Suez Canal itself.
To grasp why this news sent shockwaves through Downing Street, we need to understand the world of 1875. This was the height of the Industrial Revolution, when steam-powered ships formed the arteries of global commerce, and the Suez Canal was quite literally the beating heart of international trade. Before this engineering marvel existed, ships traveling from London to Mumbai faced a perilous journey around the entire African continent, a voyage consuming months and countless lives.
When the Suez Canal opened in 1869, it sliced straight through the Egyptian desert, connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and cutting the journey to India in half. For the British Empire, which extracted its wealth and power from India, this canal represented far more than a shipping shortcut. It was the empire's jugular vein. If the canal closed, the British economy would suffer catastrophic collapse. If a rival power like France or Russia seized control, they could hold Britain hostage. And here's the problem that kept Disraeli awake at night. Britain didn't own the canal.
The canal was the brainchild of Ferdinand de Lesseps, a Frenchman, and it was owned by a French company. The ownership was split between French investors, who controlled just over half the shares, and the Khedive of Egypt, who owned the remainder. For years, British officials watched helplessly as French vessels dominated the world's most critical waterway.
The man selling the shares was Ismail Pasha, a ruler of immense ambition and equally immense flaws. When Ismail came to power, he envisioned nothing less than the Paris of the Nile. He famously declared that Egypt was no longer part of Africa, but had joined Europe. And he spent money as though this transformation were already complete. Opera houses rose from the sand. Palaces sprawled across the landscape. Thousands of miles of telegraph lines and railways materialized. When the Suez Canal opened, Ismail threw the most lavish celebration the world had ever witnessed. He commissioned Giuseppe Verdi to compose the opera Aida. Champagne flowed endlessly, and diamonds were distributed like party favors.
But beneath this glamorous facade lurked a darker reality. Ismail didn't possess the funds to finance his vision. He was borrowing frantically from European bankers at increasingly predatory rates. During the American Civil War, Egyptian cotton prices had skyrocketed, and Ismail assumed prosperity would last forever. When the American War ended, cotton prices collapsed, but Ismail's spending continued unabated. He borrowed at 10% interest, then 12, then 20.
By 1875, interest payments alone consumed nearly all of Egypt's state revenue. The Khedive was plundering his own people to satisfy European creditors.
Now it's November, and a massive debt payment looms just weeks away. Cairo's treasury stands empty. Ismail faces public humiliation and possibly a coup. He has one card left to play. He owns 44% of the Suez Canal Company shares, and he quietly informs the French government of his willingness to sell for £4 million. The French are ecstatic. Purchasing these shares would give them near total control of the canal. But then comes the leak.
A journalist catches wind of a rumor at a dinner party and rushes to the British Foreign Office, and this is how the telegram arrives at Downing Street.
Disraeli recognizes the opportunity instantly. If he can secure those shares, he'll guarantee the route to India forever and execute the greatest diplomatic coup of the century. But there's a seemingly insurmountable problem. The Khedive needs £4 million by week's end. £4 million in 1875 equals billions in today's currency. Disraeli checks his calendar and realizes he's trapped. Parliament is in recess.
Under British law, the government cannot spend a single penny without parliamentary approval. If he waits for Parliament to reconvene, the Khedive will be bankrupt, or the French will have already purchased the shares. The French government faces no such constraint.
Disraeli sits at his desk, staring into the fire. He's 70 years old, exhausted, surrounded by political enemies. He knows this moment will never return. He must find £4 million in 48 hours without informing Parliament and without alerting the French. He summons his private secretary, Montague Corrie. The Prime Minister poses a question that sounds almost absurd. Where can we find £4 million by Tuesday?
They review their options. The Bank of England seems obvious, but its governor would never approve such an enormous loan for a secret political gamble without parliamentary authorization. Disraeli needs a private source, someone with sufficient liquidity to move millions in gold instantly, someone who trusts him personally. Only one name fits this description: the Rothschilds. The House of Rothschilds commanded the most powerful financial dynasty in the world.
The head of the London branch was Lionel de Rothschild, a personal friend of Disraeli. They shared a bond as outsiders who had reached power's pinnacle despite facing immense prejudice.
Disraeli turns to Montague and issues a verbal order. Go to the City of London immediately, find Lionel de Rothschild and request £4 million. Corrie asks what security he should offer. Disraeli possesses no collateral and doesn't even have legal authority to request the money. He looks at Corrie and delivers his answer. Tell him the security is the British government itself.
It's a magnificent bluff. Disraeli is wagering his entire career and the British Empire's reputation on a handshake. If Parliament returns and refuses to ratify the deal, Disraeli will be ruined, possibly impeached. The Rothschilds would lose their money. But Disraeli is a gambler who understands that sometimes history is made by individuals willing to risk everything on a single decisive moment.
Montague Corrie departs into the fog, knowing the fate of the Middle East rides with him. Meanwhile, in Cairo, the Khedive paces his palace while French agents press him to sign. They have contracts ready. Ismail stalls, waiting for a signal from London. If the British don't deliver by tomorrow, he'll sign with France, and the Suez Canal will be lost to Britain forever. Corrie arrives at the Rothschild headquarters. Legend tells this meeting many ways, but its core remains one of financial history's most cinematic moments.
The Baron was eating muscatel grapes, a man of immense composure who didn't look up when Corey entered. Corey delivered the Prime Minister's message. Mr. Disraeli needs £4 million tomorrow. Lionel de Rothschild pauses, selects another grape, and asks what security is offered. Corey replies exactly as instructed.
The British government. The Baron pauses again, consumes the grape, then says simply, "You shall have it."
Just like that, the deal is done. No lawyers, no lengthy contracts, no board meetings. Simply a gentleman's agreement between the Prime Minister of the world's greatest empire and the head of the world's greatest bank. The transaction speed is unprecedented. The Rothschilds mobilize their network, gathering gold and credit across Europe. When Corey returns with news, Disraeli is ecstatic. He writes a famous letter to Queen Victoria. "It is settled. You have it, madam.
You now possess the key to India." The next day, money transfers. The Khedive receives the funds with relief and sends French agents away empty-handed. When news breaks, the British public erupts with excitement. Newspapers hail Disraeli as a genius. But the story doesn't end with the purchase. The purchase merely begins the tragedy.
The £4 million proved a drop in the bucket. Within months, the Khedive was broke again. But this time, everything had changed. Now, Britain owned almost half the canal, creating direct financial stakes in Egyptian internal affairs. British and French governments sent a commission investigating the Khedive's finances and were horrified by the corruption they discovered. They established dual control, effectively seizing the Egyptian government, slashing spending, and raising peasant taxes. The Egyptian people were furious, seeing their ruler as a puppet, while their taxes enriched European bankers as their children starved.
A nationalist movement arose, led by Colonel Ahmed Arabi, with the slogan, "Egypt for the Egyptians." He wanted to expel foreign advisors and establish parliament. The British government watched with alarm, caring nothing for Egyptian democracy, but terrified a nationalist government would seize the canal. In 1882, tensions exploded. Riots erupted in Alexandria. The British sent the Royal Navy, bombarding the city and landing troops.
At the Battle of Tel el-Kebir, the British Army crushed Arabi's forces. The British general announced they were there only to restore order temporarily, but they never left. The temporary occupation lasted 72 years. The £4 million loan had transformed into military conquest.
This is the true legacy of the Suez Purchase. Once they bought the shares, they had to protect them. To protect the shares, they had to control the Egyptian government. To control the government, they had to occupy the country. Mission creep on a continental scale. The irony is that Disraeli died before the occupation began, never seeing British troops march into Cairo. He thought he'd made a clever financial deal, not realizing he'd started a chain reaction defining the modern Middle East.
When we look back at that foggy evening in 1875, we're witnessing the birth of the modern Middle East, the moment financial power superseded sovereignty. The British didn't need to invade Egypt with an army in 1875. They just needed a checkbook. The army came later to collect the bill. The Suez Canal purchase teaches us a lesson still relevant today.
Debt is a weapon, and sometimes the most dangerous invasion force isn't a regiment of soldiers, but a single piece of paper signed in a quiet room by a desperate man. If you found this story fascinating, make sure you subscribe, because history is filled with moments like these. History never repeats exactly, but it certainly rhymes. Stay with us as we continue uncovering the next chapter of our shared past.